Welcome to Legal Masterminds at Law Leaders. I'm your host, Dustin Ruge, and today we're going to be talking about how you can use new AI technology to help draft your complaints, pleadings, discoveries, and motions much faster, smarter, and much lower cost. Today we're joined by Arthur Rothrock, who is the founder of Legion, and Arthur is an experienced litigation attorney out of California. So Arthur, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Dustin. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So Arthur, tell us a little bit before we get into your system, a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I moved out to beautiful California to become an attorney. The past 8 years or so, I've been a litigation attorney focused on civil, and a lot of trust and estate litigation. And a few years ago, when AI sort of hit the scene, I started incorporating it into my workflows pretty significantly. And I found that there was huge time savings with it. And I kind of became known at my firm for being able to turn around, a motion that would take a week in a few hours. So I was a miracle
Wow.
worker with it. And whenever other people tried to sort of replicate that, they were having some issues. And so I realized that there was sort of a business here. And once we kind of got rolling, that's how Legion was born, where I wanted to sort of give, the learnings that I have from incorporating AI into my workflows, put it into the hands of other attorneys who may not be as AI savvy, make it as easy as possible for them to use. And that's what we've been doing for about the past year now.
So really the genesis of your company came out of just supporting your own practice. And then obviously it's grown quite a bit since then, right?
That's right. I mean, it's all about practical use of it. And you really got to play with these things to understand what they can do, and more importantly, what their limitations are. I mean, everyone's heard about the hallucination issues associated with it. There's context windows, like its short-term memory really matters. So managing all that sort of stuff and knowing how to be a good communicator is very important for it. And we wanted that sort of practical use to be condensed into Legion.
And Arthur, did you start rolling this out to other attorneys at your firm first or other people you were working with? How did you kind of see the evolution of your technology?
Yeah, so it was pretty funny of a story. So I was very open with my firm about what I was doing, and I said, "Hey, I'm doing this AI tech company right now," and they're like, "That's okay." They were in the middle. I didn't know at the time, in the middle of merger talks with another large firm, so they were not really worried about what I was doing. They said, we would prefer that you'd be more of a silent board member." And I said, "Okay." And then a month later, I was like, "Anyway, I'm CEO now, and I need to be talking about this on LinkedIn and stuff." And they eventually said, unfortunately, I think we have a conflict of interest because we provide traditional legal services, and what you're doing is not that. And I was like, okay. So I quit in July and started working at Legion full time. We've grown to about 20 law firms now that are using us. And our initial business model was essentially, we'll say yes to anything. We'll just see what attorneys want to offload. Like, what do they hate doing? Where is there probably a market for this sort of a service? And behind the scenes, I would use AI to draft the stuff and figure out how we could automate it. And after about a year of that, we started condensing that learning into Legion, and we're launching this week our next iteration where we now provide our first self-service workflow where you can hop in, create a matter, and provide it like a demand letter, a client intake sheet, like an angry client email, whatever that you have on hand that you're going to turn into a complaint. You give it to Legion, you give it some instructions like you would to an associate, like, I need a complaint to represent such and such, at a minimum, alleged negligence, and whatever else that you think is probably relevant. And then it takes that and turns it into your fully fledged document. So it's been fun. We started off doing something that was not scalable, and now we're finally moving to something that is scalable.
Right. And there's quite a bit of work here. I mean, it's interesting when you look at complaints, pleadings, discovery motions. I mean, this is a big time suck for a lot of law firms and attorneys. I mean, and prior to this technology, how were you having to do this? Was it all pretty much manual? Is that what most attorneys are dealing with today?
It really does depend on practice area, but in general, yes, it is all manual. I mean, some firms that have gotten really good at automating some stuff, maybe they can do a complaint in a few hours. But typically, you're looking at 8 hours or more. I mean, a lot of motions that I've worked on have been a minimum of like 30 hours. You end up with 200-page separate statements. Like, there's a lot of time that gets sucked into drafting. And it's not like suits or something where you get to show up in court and argue all the time. Oftentimes your butt's in a seat for like 12 hours drafting. It's very, very time consuming. And so being able to do that in a much shorter time period is huge, because a lot of this work is not the most riveting stuff. I mean, it can be pretty tedious, to be frank. Legal writing oftentimes is very creative. That's why we have IRAC, issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. You apply that to pretty much everything, and that's what you get. So, yeah,
Right.
that's all I have.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I know last time you and I had talked and went through the system, we saw quite a bit of capabilities there. In fact, I started doing the math, which we'll wrap on at the end here, as to the real economic impact of your system, which is staggering based upon my calculations alone, which we'll walk through once we get through your system a little bit. But I think this might be a good time, if it's okay with you, to kind of jump into the system and give people just a kind of a flavor as to what it does and the capabilities that are there.
Here. Okay. So this is our matter view. So basically, you create a matter, you upload whatever documents that you want to it. We use AI to automatically rename them. A big pain point for us at the firm that I was at was trying to stick to a consistent naming scheme. This one makes it real easy, and if you hate it, we always let you disable it. The other sort of neat thing that we have in here is we do analytics on all of the documents you upload. So we get, context, we get a summary to kind of tell you what the document is, what it's about. And we also pull case information. So we'll have, who the parties are that we see in there. We will construct a timeline for you. Our long-term goal for this platform is to offer, start to finish, a start to finish platform that's AI native for attorneys that is very, very useful. So whenever you upload a bunch of documents, we'll pull out all the dates and then create a chronology for you behind the scenes. If you upload a deposition transcript that's like 250 pages, you can ask questions about it. Did they ever testify to this? Did opposing counsel ever object to this thing? So it makes it a lot easier and convenient. You get to your answers a lot faster rather than having to manually search for things, that sort of stuff. Because we are running these things through classification system, we also know what it is. So you can see here, I have a bunch of demand letters that are uploaded. It knows it's correspondence. It knows it's a demand letter. And we use that in order to automatically create like deadlines for you. So if you have discovery, we see that, and then we can create a deadline for you where responses are due in 30 days. So we keep track of that stuff, so you don't need to constantly be juggling deadlines with it that way. And I'm going to go ahead and generate a new document. Right now, we can do a complaint. I'm just going to select one of these demand letters that I have uploaded. This is probably a personal injury one. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell it, please draft a complaint with all possible. And you can give any other sort of instructions that you want as well. It's similar to how you would give this assignment to an associate. Here's a demand letter. Here's what I'm looking for. Here's who I represent. And then off to the races. So it's going to go ahead and take a look at the fact pattern, and it's going to provide a bunch of different causes of action that it's going to propose. If I don't like something like vicarious liability, I can go ahead and delete it. It's very easy for me to reorder these things. So if I want to have my strongest cause of action at the beginning, I can do so. And this looks good to me, so I'm going to go ahead and approve, and it's going to go ahead and start drafting me my complaint. Now we use a variety of models behind the scenes. We have zero data retention agreements with all of them. Everything is protected. Our terms of service are quite robust. I believe we're a litigation support services provider, and no one's going to be coming after us for attorney work product. It's all going to be protected. And our terms of service make sure that we're going to fight tooth and nail. God forbid anyone ever tries to subpoena us. So you see that it's gone ahead and taken our demand letter and drafted us our very first nature of complaint relief sought. Has all the parties, our jurisdiction and venue, statement of facts. Now this is initially written pretty journalistic. So one of my favorite things to do for this is this is a personal injury case. I'm a plaintiff's attorney. We're going to pound the table a little bit. So I'm going to say, let's make this a more emotionally compelling narrative, like we're a zealous.
So you're basically telling AI to change the tone of the document, essentially.
That's right.
Yeah.
And attorneys have ways that they like to write. They have certain
Yep.
requirements, and our platform learns that, and you'll be able to save those for next time, so that you will have a product that is customized to you. So rather than you train up your associate, you spend 3, 4 years, maybe more, and then they leave. Now you have to train up a new one. Legion's not going anywhere. It'll learn exactly what your preferences are. So you can see, it's a little bit more emotionally compelling. Plaintiff was peacefully and lawfully operating her Corvette. Without warning, defense vehicle violently collided with plaintiff's Corvette, forever changing the trajectory of her life. So we're really kind of the table on that one.
Right.
One of my favorite feedback that I would get from my mentor, Steve Ellenberg, he would say, Rothrock, you drafted this at a 12. Let's take it down to about a 7. But he would tell me, please keep drafting at a 12. It makes it very entertaining for me to read. But if I'm ever not available to review your work, please tone it down automatically to a 7. So now I can just have AI do it for me. And now, it's a little bit more toned down. It's intelligent enough to understand what you mean just by providing normal language like you would to an associate. There we go. It maintained an active lifestyle, fulfilled her professional obligations, blah, blah, blah. So it's a little bit less pounding the table. And of course, if I don't like any of this, we have version control on everything. I can just hop back and forward. I can do inline edits if I want, and that will also create, a new version. So whatever we're happy with, I'll just go ahead with this one. And then I'm just going to go ahead and approve everything and then generate the first draft. We charge $10 a page for early adopters. We will probably adjust this up as we get rolling here, but for now, $10 a page is too attractive a deal to pass up. We overcome that hesitancy to trust AI with it, but I think we deliver some pretty good value with it at that. And also, a lot of our customers are small, mid-size, to large law firms, not big law firms. And so, they're a little bit more price sensitive. They don't want to pay for something that they may, not use. So they can use it on an as needed basis. I'm going to go ahead and confirm this.
So just to level set with everybody, there is no cost to use the system unless you're actually using it, right? And it's only on a per document basis, correct?
Correct. We have, a lot of quality of life features that we'll want to implement. So we'll probably have like a Legion premium for like the chronology, for all the analytics on the documents, for chat with document features that are a little harder to value on a usage basis. We'll probably have a subscription model, but I don't want to prevent folks from generating documents because that's really the core of what we're offering here. So it has my information up at the top. We have a nice fully formatted complaint. We use styles. So, if you want to add new headings, you can. It's very easy. All the paragraph numbers are in here. It's not raw text. And you have yourself a nicely formatted complaint. Also, the line numbers match up. It's always something that I see folks struggling with. There you go. So that's your complaint. It only took us a few minutes. And you're ready to go.
It's remarkable. Now each jurisdiction court system, Arthur, might change a little bit, right? So this works obviously in California. What about other states where other people say, "Hey, I'd love to use this in Illinois or New York or things of that"? How do you address those questions?
Sure. So for now, we are concentrating on California. We plan to expand to the most litigious states. We got Pennsylvania, Texas, Illinois is on there, Florida. And that's where we really want to hit. It's really a little bit of swapping out templates and changing the the sort of the language used, like in New York, for instance, it'll be counts instead of causes of action, or same thing with Illinois, counts instead of cause of action. So when we make those adjustments, it'll be pretty easy. And I think even if there's some more granular changes that are needed, I think we're delivering enough value. Like we're getting you 90% of the way there. If you need to spend a couple minutes making a tweak in order to comply with whatever your local jurisdiction is, I think the cost savings is, going to override. The convenience is going to override, having to comply with stuff like that.
Okay. So right now, at least at the time of filming of this, it does work in California. Your plan is to roll that out nationwide. What other types of things are you working on right now that people should be aware of that the system will be able to do?
Great question. So we want to start tackling discovery and motions. So, anytime you get a complaint, immediately start doing contention interrogatories. We're going to have a really great contention interrogatory builder. We're going to have a discovery builder that'll tackle your request for admission, interrogatories, request for production, that sort of stuff. We make it as easy as possible for you to draft that sort of stuff in the same convenient workflow that we're doing for the complaint. And we'll start tackling motions as well because that's a huge time sink. It takes a lot of time. It's something that I think people struggle with the most. And I think we're going to create a platform that makes it very, very simple to kind of walk you through doing it generally. So we're going to have a general discovery or general motion builder that'll let you sort of tackle any motion that you want. And then I want to work on more targeted ones. So, if you have a demur, if you have a motion to compel, stuff that comes up quite often, we can deliver a lot more time savings on that by doing a lot of the work for you because a lot of the case law hasn't changed much, like on what does an vague and ambiguous objection mean in California? I mean, the case law on that's 60 years old. I don't think anyone's going to change it. So it makes it a little bit easier for us to set up a workflow where it's very easy to argue about that objection and say it's without merit. And that's the sort of, value add that I want to start expanding. So not only are we going to tackle general, we'll start tackling more specific workflows. So the general motion builder, maybe it'll take you a few hours to do. I want you to be able to bang out a motion to compel in like a few minutes, same as the complaint, because we're going to have a lot more hand holding. We're going to do a lot of the work for you at the outset.
Wow. And Arthur, do you ever get any questions around from attorneys how the system might be able to help with addressing, for example, affirmative defenses or things like that in the language of the pleadings?
Yeah, one of the great things about this is when attorneys sort of see this complaint builder, they're the gears start turning in their head about thinking of the other things that oh, can you do this? Can you do this? And one of the things that comes up is, can you do answers? We can't do answers to verify complaints yet. That's very granular. We can do general denials, and it's a very similar workflow for identifying affirmative defenses. You're just going to select them like you would with the cause of action. It's a very similar workflow. So we're gonna tackle that as well.
Excellent. Well, some of the things that struck me, and I know, Arthur, when you and I first saw the system and you were walking me through it, a lot of attorneys are like how AI can really help their practice. And obviously, you got way ahead of this early on. Uh, just a couple notes on this. I was thinking through this originally that we follow labor statistics quite a bit and trends, and we noticed that, for example, a lot of these larger law firms are actually giving around a 50% labor premium for these attorneys that can come in to use these tools and use these types of things because obviously you can see the productivity gains that are there. They're significant. And in fact, a lot of the studies that have come out recently say anywhere from 60 to 80% of all the functions that attorneys do can now be automated through some or supported through some type of AI technology. And I was walking through some of the math just to talk about the economic impacts that your system could have just doing this type of work within the industry. I want to run through a couple numbers with you. Time we had talked that an average complaint is around 15 pages. Is that roughly correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to generalize, but I would say
Right.
50.
But you use the system, so you know it pretty well, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I would say,
okay.
I've litigated for 8 years. I've seen a decent number of complaints. They can get very long, but 15 is a good, number that I think applied across everything works.
Right. So when you charge $10, so obviously there's a fee to do that, but then we're looking at the time components involved with it, with using or filing a complaint. You had mentioned before, like even at good law firms that are using templates, the fastest they can typically do on average complaint, a low level complaint would be about 3 hours. We know they can take up to 20 or so or more hours, right? And then I think you had also mentioned that there were roughly around 230,000 civil filings last year just in the state of California alone. And
Yeah, I think
when
I
I,
need to update that a little bit. I rechecked. I think it's around 280,000, but
As a 280. Okay. Well, let's
a
just
lot.
stick to the 230 because this is what really struck me. Because when I look at the numbers, if an average, for example, civil litigation attorney, say they're making on average, 350 an hour or something of that nature, the productivity gains alone just by complaint, I'm doing my math, is around $725 per complaint. So basically what I'm doing is I'm looking at the total hours before your system, the time savings of doing this within about 30 minutes, right? And then the cost of using your system. When you do that times the total number of complaints just in California alone, if they were 230,000, this has an economic impact of over $166 million just in California in productivity savings. And then I think nationwide, if you look at state and federal courts combined, there's somewhere around 65 million cases that are filed every year, which you're talking about tens of billions of dollars in economic impact just in productivity. A lot of people are like, well, what can AI really do for me as an attorney? Well, this is it, right? I mean, the productivity gains are significant, and you're really at the forefront of this, especially for sit or for people that are filing litigation. Is what can you do to actually help their practice? This is actually one of the best tools I've seen to help them in their productivity and become more efficient with what they're doing and their time. And that's why I was taken away when I saw the system. I was like, wow! When I started doing the math and what this means for a special litigation attorney. This basically means, do you need this much staff anymore? Do you need these assistants and paralegals and associates to help you like you used to and be as productive as you need to be? And right now, based upon the technology I'm seeing with what you produce, clearly the answer is no. Not moving forward in the future, you become much more effective and much more financially independent than perhaps you've ever done as an attorney just using a simple tool like this.
Well, first off, thank you for the kind words. We're very proud of what we've done so far, and we plan to deliver a whole lot more. I think you've touched on a really good point there, which is we're basically going to turn attorneys into one-man armies. There was a 20, 30 years ago, big law firms hired a ton of new associates because doc review was so time-consuming. You
Right?
needed a lot of bodies to do it, right? But now we're sort of in this digital era where we have all these sort of efficiency gains, all these e-discovery tools. We have tech assisted review, all that sort of stuff. And then we saw a pretty big contraction in big law firms in their hiring. And so I think we're going to also see something like that similarly. And honestly, it might be a good thing, right? Because now, you have, one attorney can handle a much larger case than they would before, where you would need an army of people to do it. And now you don't really have that sort of tiered system. I mean, you can use AI to do quite a lot of the heavy lifting for you already. It's also, I think, going to get us to a trial on the merits a lot quicker because, a big strategy for, folks with a bigger bank account is to grind down the opposition. And then you just fight tooth and nail on every little thing. And if you can sort of handle that with AI, no problem, then, now it's going to be, you're just going to call up opposing counsel and say, okay, how do we figure this out? Because otherwise, you're not going to be able to play the same games that you could before. So I think that your point of seeing huge efficiency gains is well taken, and I think that people are going to struggle a little bit in terms of how to incorporate this, right? Because
Right.
attorneys bill by the hour, obviously. So there is a perverse incentive to be inefficient in the legal industry. But as clients become more savvy and they see the savings, they're going to start demanding it. They're like, "Why are you charging me 20 hours for a complaint that I saw Joe Schmo over there drafted that thing for it only took 30 minutes." And it didn't cost them anything. So, there's going to be a lot of pressure, I think, from clients that are going to force this change, and people are going to need to start to learn how to adapt to that. I mean, the other
Yeah,
aspect is it's cheaper, right? So that means more people can now afford to litigate a case, which I feel for our judges if that's going to be the case.
well, and you're right. We're already seeing the transparency alone with the technology where a lot of consumers are going to be competitive, and they're going to be looking for what are their options because in the past, legal billing was not very transparent. They didn't know what they could afford and what they can do. And that's all changing along with this as well. So it's kind of like you either do it or you're probably not going to get the client, right? Yeah, very, very compelling. And just out of curiosity, how long would it take for an average litigation attorney to become relatively proficient on your system? What have you seen based upon new users that have come on board using your tool?
I don't want to brag, but I would say they become pretty sophisticated within a few minutes. I mean, it's very
Wow.
easy to use. I mean, because when you think about it, as long as you frame it in a way that is consistent with how their normal workflow is, they get it, right? You're like, okay, look at this section, and if you were telling an associate what you don't like about it, all you have to do is do that here, and then it will revise and revamp it for you. And so even folks that have not been very AI savvy, they are now starting to tease it out. And, they'll say, oh, can it do this? Like, I love the curiosity that we see, like they get the base system. Here's what it's supposed to do. And, just today we had a demo with a firm that does a lot of trust and estate litigation. And they said, this is really cool. Can it do petitions? I'm like, well, it's not set up for petitions right now, but if you bully it enough, it'll do it. It'll do it. I mean, you just say, hey, we're not doing a complaint today. We're doing a petition and it'll adjust the jurisdiction and venue stuff to align with whatever probate stuff is in California. But really, it's the same sort of components. Like it's going to give you the facts section, it's going to give you your introduction. It's just going to be in a slightly different context. And so I've been impressed by people not only being able to use the platform pretty intuitively, but also yes and then they start saying like, okay, so what else can I push it to do? And that's exactly what I want. I want them to feel like this is very magical, and them to, sort of dip their toes in. We do most of the hard work for you, and we give you the opportunity to play with it a little bit more and learn how the system works. So I think the time to get to a level of competency is very, very low. To master it, maybe a little higher. I think people are going to become better communicators, because you'll realize that saying please fix, the AI is not going to understand, just like your poor associate isn't going to understand what you want by that. So it's going to force you to think about a little bit harder about what you actually want, and then communicate that. So
Right.
only good things.
Right. And the final question I had, Arthur, is some of the pushback I get from some attorneys are around AI is around hallucination, right? What does this do that potentially threatens the integrity of their work? How do you address that when those questions come up around the use of your system?
Sure. So uh, every attorney knows that they're subject to ethical obligations to review and know everything that they file with the court. So any of these attorneys that are getting sanctioned by it, are not complying with their ethical obligations. Like, you're supposed to be doing this already. For our system, with complaints, there's not a whole lot of case law that's usually going into it. But they still need to review and approve each section. And I think this is a good question for whenever we get to the motion builder stuff. And the answer to that one is, we do a lot of the legwork for you already. So the model is provided the case law that's relevant for whatever the task is. And then we have it on strict guardrails where, it's only supposed to use the stuff that we give it. And then we'll have a system in place that can check whatever the output is to see if there's any, cases that have been cited that are not in the bank that we gave it. So that's one way. And the other way, honestly, working with it, sometimes I will see a new case. I'm like, that's not what I gave it. And then I'll check it, and it's actually a relevant case that's on point. So, we'll probably have another system in place where, I've been talking to some other founders that are trying to tackle the legal research angle. I'd love to use their API to just pull the case, show it to the model, show it to what it drafted, and say, hey, does this look like it matches? If not, remove it. And then we'll have like a internal iterative process where we can sort of tackle those sort of hallucination issues, because I do want attorneys to be able to trust what they're getting. So, we're not using it for legal research. That's Legion is not going to do that. We're here to do the drafting for you. So,
Yep.
I think that, Lexis and Westlaw have that sort of unlock, and they're gonna figure that out. So
Sure.
we're gonna apply it is what I'm looking at.
Yeah. And looking at your own career as a litigation attorney, how much of your time would you say was dedicated to the functions that this tool now automates for you when you're drafting complaints, all those types of things?
Probably like 95%, to be honest. I
Wow.
mean, if you are, I'm an eighth year litigation associate or attorney, I guess, so I'm no longer at a firm.
Right.
And your first like 5 years, unless you're like in a mill or something where, if you're doing criminal law, then you're in court all the time. If
Right.
you're doing like maybe insurance or workers' comp, then you're doing a lot more depositions and you're in court a little bit more. But if you're a typical civil attorney at like a mid-sized firm, you know, uh, clients usually don't want you to be the one out there arguing the motion. They want the big fancy partner, with their name in the name of the firm, there in court arguing for you. So that usually means that, your associates are usually the ones who are the primary drafters of most stuff. So all your motions, all your discovery, all your complaint, all your pleadings, it's usually the first draft, second draft is usually done by the associate. And so that means your butt is in a seat and you're working, 8 to 12 hours a day doing drafting. A little sometimes if it's a small motion, maybe you'll go in court. But yeah, I would say the gross majority of my time was doing a lot of the drafting stuff that we're tackling now. Pleadings, motions, and discovery.
Yep. And now with your tool, you were able to literally take what takes hours into minutes through this
Yeah,
production.
I think the canary in the coal mine is going to really be what's happening to software engineers and coders, right? Because these
Yeah.
tools are really designed by them for them, and whatever sort of happens in their industry, I think we're going to see an effect on our industry, probably a little bit further down the line, right? Because we're a little bit slower on the uptake compared to
Right.
the rest of tech. But that's where I'd be looking for how people are adjusting to the sort of new economics of this.
Right. Great. So Arthur, if somebody is interested in using your tool or signing up or starting to use your system, what would be the best way for them to get started?
Sure. They can check us out at Legion.law. At the top right, there's a button to get started, and that'll let you book a time with me, and we'll get you set up. We can have you take a test drive of the system. You can provide your own demand letter, angry client email, client intake sheet, whatever you have handy that you would reference to draft a complaint, and we'll let you go ahead and do it, and we'll just sit with you and walk you right through the whole process. If you don't want to go to our website, you just want to email me directly. My email is arthur@legion.law. That's again arthur@legion.law. Super easy. Feel free to shoot me an email and we'll get something set up.
Arthur, thank you for your time today. This is fantastic. I know I was excited when I first saw the system and looking at all the AI revolution. This is certainly one of the biggest ones I've seen. And I think you're really on to something here. And I think a lot of attorneys will benefit from this. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Arthur or go to the website, as you mentioned before, Legion.law. And if you like this video or like our channel, please subscribe on YouTube. And thanks for watching.